This NHL season has been as predictable as a puck rolling on its edge. No one knows where it's going, but that just means there's time for your favorite team to figure things out, and games left for you to get in the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. And if you are new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. NHL and NHL team marks are the property of the NHL and its teams.
Episode 98 of the Habs Culture Podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz alongside Liam Baum. We're not even going to get into the Montreal Canadiens' last 10 games. It is truthfully not even worth it. One win in the last 9, if I'm not mistaken, Liam. They beat the Sharks in San Jose, which in a game that they realistically did not deserve to win, which makes it that much funnier. But I don't understand. We'll just spend 2 minutes on it because I find it so funny. I don't understand how you go from probably one of the best months of Canadiens hockey that we've seen, maybe arguably in the last 3 seasons, to now probably one of the worst months of hockey, or January and first 2 weeks of February.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't understand what's happened. We've kind of singled in on the fact that Gouli has been injured since that game against New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. But the truth is that collapse happened way before, or not way before that, but a few games before that. And now Laine's playing 12 minutes a night. Last 5 games, he's a -5, no points. Slav looks like he's playing peewee hockey, and I don't want to diss the guy, but it's so night and day between last season, back end of the season, and the way that he's playing now. It's almost as if his confidence fluctuates every 24 hours. Like, it's just nuts.
It's just so demoralizing. Like, when the Habs are doing well, we're always going over stats and obviously so active on Twitter, and then they lose 9 games out of their last 10 or whatever it is. Just post up the Instagram edit of the thank you fans. You know, the season's over. Pack it up. We're running Tankathon every day, trying to see how far we're moving up the draft. But I think that just about summarizes it.
But it's just so funny to me because you're going from, like, it's just two extremes.
It is.
There's no middle ground at all.
I thought, you would have thought that the streak, not even the streak, just like being at least 500 would last a little bit longer. And I guess that tweet really backfired on us, saying who's going to be competing for a wild card spot, because I think the Habs are out of the question now. So it's unfortunate, but we keep moving.
But it's not worth dwelling on too much because the NHL is out of action until February 22nd.
Yeah.
So today we're the 9th?
The 10th.
9th, right?
10th.
Wow. Should probably start studying or something. But the 10th.
Read a book.
Yeah, get in the lab, because honestly, sorry, we're both in joking moods today, but hopefully that lightens your mood. And as we plan to go over the 4 Nations lines that released today on February 10th, teams are in action. Teams are already on the ice. Teams are ready to rock and roll, as the kids say. And I don't know. I think that it's going to be really, really interesting. The fact that we get to see, we've mentioned it before, but McDavid, Crosby, and McKinnon on the same team, and we get to cheer for them. That's unreal. But I think that the lines are interesting. I think that some of the players that they put together are interesting, but we'll go over them more in depth. I don't think that there's anything to write home about though. We'll start with Canada because we're Canadian and this is the home team, and we're hoping that they take home the Four Nations Cup. I don't know if that's what
I get that. It's true. What is it called? The Four Nations Championship?
I have no idea. I think it's a really interesting, and the one thing that I was going to mention too is that, and I'm going to ask you this question because I'm genuinely curious, and maybe you don't know the answer, but is this considered international play? Because I know it is between nations, but it is a tournament that was created by the NHL, like whereas the Olympics is not. You know
But
what I
then,
mean?
yeah, no, I get what you mean, and I was kind of wondering the same thing. But like, was the World Cup of Hockey IIHF or NHL
This is not IHF.
organized?
IIHF.
Yeah, no. And then, does it really count as a international tournament? There's only 4 countries.
Yeah, that's what, like, technically speaking, it is international, right?
Yeah,
Because you're
but it's
going
it's
nation
only
to nation.
NHLers.
Right.
And there's no, you're still missing a bulk of the best NHL players. So I don't know. But if you're like another question, I'm going to ask you, let's say Canada wins, would that make Crosby part of a quintuple gold group? The World
So,
Juniors, Olympics, World Cup.
and I guess did he play at the World
Oh
Championship?
yeah, World Championship.
Right.
And then obviously, yeah. And then
But I
I
don't know.
guess,
Are they giving out gold medals? Like, I don't understand.
yeah.
To get
Oh, it's
bronze
true.
is ridiculous.
There is
Like,
no
nice, you were
bronze.
second to last. That's not
But there isn't even a bronze medal game. So
no bronze medal game, right? So okay, I didn't even know that. So clearly a lot of things that we need to touch up on. But I
yeah.
think that probably if you watch as much hockey as we do, the fact that we don't know is pretty significant. But nonetheless, we'll get into it. We'll start right away. I Correct me if I'm wrong. I think some teams have established lines, some teams
Yeah.
have not.
So
But
yeah, today most of the official lines and power play lines came out except for Finland.
yeah,
So
because
that should be
they're dealing with a bunch of injuries, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, yeah. But
So
we can still take a look at their
yeah, we'll take
what Daily Faceoff believes will be their lines.
So we'll start with Canada, like I mentioned before. Forward lines. Connor McDavid between Sam Reinhart and Mitch Marner. Sidney Crosby between Mark Stone and Nathan McKinnon. Braden Point between Marchand and Seth Jarvis. And Anthony Cirelli between Brandon Hagel and Sam Bennett. Without even thinking, Liam, don't even think. Don't think. What's the first thing that jumps off the page to you?
Well, to me, it's Mark Stone being on the second line over Marchand. Because I would have thought Crosby, Marchand, McKinnon all being from Nova Scotia, and Crosby and Marchand having chemistry and tons of or I guess international games, they would have been on the same line. But I guess that was the decision that John Cooper made, and Mark Stone is also the fact that the third line is really small. No, and then it would just seem like Mark Stone would make more sense to play with two smaller guys rather than Marchand being, they're all of them are like 5'9". I don't know how tall Jarvis is, but he's not tall.
No. No, he's
That's
not.
what sticks out to me.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think I don't even know what sticks off the page to me. Like, I think it's more some of the guys that we've already talked about, some guys that were put on this team, some guys that were omitted from the team. So I don't want to go into that again. But I think what sticks off or jumps off the page to me is the fact that this team is just really, really solid from A to Z. At least
Yeah.
the forward core. I don't see many holes. I do think that I will admit though, I do think that the Sam Bennett, like him being there, is just in my opinion, it's out of pocket. Like, what are we? What has he done?
He had again, it was like the first half of the season, and then they made these picks. They were like premeditated picks. So who's the one player that's scratched?
Let me scroll down.
Because I thought Bennett or Jarvis would be the one who's scratched.
Konechny's is day to day. Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, I would get Konechny in there on the fourth.
No, I think that makes a huge difference. Realistically, I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think he brings that more offensive game, but at the same time a strong physical and defensive presence. But like Sam Bennett is just not a complete package like Konechny is.
Yeah, I think Konechny is probably like a top tier bottom six forward for a team like this,
For sure.
right? Like
If you're trying to build the mold of a gritty bottom six, then he's the type of guy you want, I'd say.
and I think Hagel too. I think you can make the same. I think you can make the same comment about Jarvis. I think those are three guys that really bring two dimensions, like a really a 200-foot game,
Yeah.
with that grittiness. So I have no problem with that. I think Anthony Sorelli on the fourth line is purely based off the fact that John Cooper is the coach, and nothing against Anthony Sorelli as a player. He'll win you faceoffs in key moments. He'll be a great penalty killer. But again, bias aside, to leave Nick Suzuki off this team, especially at the center position, or Mark Scheifele, excuse me, like that's something that you gotta discuss. Because at the end of the day, Liam, the thing that bothers me the most is that if you're gonna make the argument that Anthony Sorelli should be on this team because of his defensive capabilities and his ability to kill penalties and win faceoffs, well, you can point to three other centers on this team that can do that just as, or maybe not just as well, but I would argue that Crosby and McDavid, or Crosby more particularly, can do that just as well as Sorelli. And the truth is, in a short tournament like that, you can play Crosby on the PK, you could play him on the power play. Like there's the argument of getting tired in a short tournament, I don't think is actually a valid one, because even if he plays a bit of PK and he plays the power play, he's not going to play more than 23 minutes a game, right? Like,
Yeah, I agree with you. But I do think there's just a lot of Tampa guys. But I agree with you. Crosby should be playing PK. Or maybe they just want to, roll four lines, or not necessarily roll four lines, but give everybody a role on the team rather than having guys play like 8 minutes. Like rather than the top two lines playing like 23 or like 20 to 23 minutes each, those guys will be the ones who aren't on the PK. And yeah, I guess that would be the role of the bottom six guys. So they're not going to play like 8 minutes. They're going to play like 13.
right.
So
But
I don't know.
No, you're definitely right. I think, but again, like that's the nature of any hockey team, whether it be at like in the NHL or whether it's at the Four Nations. Like, I guess
Yeah.
they're going to try and take a bit of the load off of the shoulders of some of the bigger guys, and they'll, like, I guarantee you, in a game where Canada's maybe down a goal, they'll have the same five players on for 3 minutes, right? So, for them to be able to play those minutes as opposed to playing the PK minutes obviously makes sense. But you can also make the argument that, well, if Anthony Sorelli is going to be there, you can also have a guy like Nick Suzuki, who's proven to be a 70 plus or maybe almost a point per game player at this level on a bottom team with the Canadians. And he's able of playing a 200-foot game, sometimes better than any other player in the league, yet he's omitted off this list. So questionable to me. We've talked about that before. We don't need to go into detail on it. But I do think, Liam, and the one other comment I'm going to make about this forward core is that it's, as much as there's a lot of offensive firepower, McDavid, McKinnon, Marner, Crosby, Reinhardt, I guess, like there's a lot of offensive firepower. A lot of these guys are really, really good defensively, which I think makes them, I wouldn't say better than they are, but I think gives them a bump in the power rankings, if you will, strictly based off the fact that they're all really good at both ends of the ice.
Yeah, just looking at it, like Marner and Reinhardt, some of the best PK players in the league, and then you have Stone, Marchand, and Crosby, who are very trustworthy defensively, and then, I mean, even Seth Jarvis, Hagel, and then obviously a guy like Chiarelli. Like everyone has a defensive role on their current NHL team, and I think that's what makes Canada probably the most dangerous in terms of their forward group, because it's not pure offense. It's a good mix of both, and I think that's where the U.S. kind of struggles.
Yeah, and we'll get into them in a second, but we'll just go to the defensive pairings and then the goalies. Devon Taves on the left, Cale Makar on the right. So the two guys from Colorado. Josh Morrissey on the left, Colton Parayko on the right, Shea Theodore on the left, Drew Doughty on the right. Once again, Liam, what jumps off the page?
I mean, Parayko, obviously, but we've talked about this. They wanted size. But I think the Drew Doughty replacement is kind of questionable. He was chosen to replace Alex Pietrangelo. I just don't understand why they go with Drew Doughty, who has played like 10 games this season, hasn't been good. I mean, he's a minute muncher, but he doesn't bring much to the table in terms of offense anymore. And I think there's a lot of other good defensemen that they could have selected, whether that's Dougie Hamilton or like I know Evan Bouchard gets a lot of hate, but again, he's very offensive, and they took a guy like Pareko and they took a guy like Devin Taves to play those more defensive roles. So I don't understand why they take a guy like Drew Doughty. It's just, I guess he brings a vet presence and some leadership, but again, it's a short tournament, like you said, and to me, Drew Doughty's just a bit of a weird selection.
I think the one thing that jumps off the page to me is the fact that, and I don't know who I would necessarily replace any of them with, but it's the fact that I think they're missing that elevated level of that elevated level of skating ability. Like Cale Makar is a premium skater, and you're not going to find that very often. But a lot of these other guys, like you said, you mentioned size, and most of these guys are pretty hefty in a sense. Like they're bigger bodies that. But I don't know. I feel like you're missing that dimension of skill on the blue line, which could be costly in a short tournament. Like we mentioned beforehand in previous episodes, in these tournaments, I feel like you shoot more for skill and less about the way that your team is designed / built. And a big reason as to why they went this way is because of the goaltending situation, right? Because they wanted to play a tougher game, a grittier game, a more physical game in front of their goalies, which I'm assuming they recognize wasn't a strength for them, wasn't a strength for Canada, right? And if you guys didn't hear already, Montembeault is rotating in as the third goalie, so that means Binnington and Aiden Hill are the suggested starters for Team Canada, whoever goes game one, but they'll probably both get some action.
I actually heard John Cooper said today that they're not planning on doing a rotation. It's just going to be one goalie.
Okay, so there you go. So apologies there, but nonetheless, it just means that one of Binnington or Aiden Hill is going to be the starter. And the truth is, we've looked at the numbers before. They've both been
mid,
below average. And like you said, when you look at Sam Bennett and you say, oh, well, he had a good start to the season, I think that unfortunately they were picking more based off of recency bias than actual
historical, like their career averages. Sam Bennett was obviously overproducing his normal production, and they decided, oh, let's take him because he's having a good year, and then all of a sudden drops back down to earth and even lower than his career average in the last, I don't know, I want to say like 20 games. So again, it's just going back to the fact that they made these picks really early, and again, it's the same story with the goalies. Logan Thompson hasn't cooled down at all. He's been consistently hot, and just to hear him say that Canada didn't even want him or give him a call is just insane to me.
It's kind of nuts, honestly. It's kind of nuts, but at the same time, like whatever. I guess we'll see what happens. Like I have a weird feeling that at the end of the day, like I don't know if you can win a tournament with this goaltending. That's the problem that I have. And we always say, again, it's a common theme amongst people that that love to talk hockey, but you don't need a premium goaltender to win a cup, for example. You just need that hot goalie. And
I wouldn't say either of them are hot, which sucks because
that's the thing. It's like,
yeah,
for them to get hot, you're going to need them to get hot. They're going to have a good game one.
Yeah. But Binnington just let in 5 against Chicago. So that's what we're going into the tournament with.
But hey, we're not gonna argue. But yeah, I think that's what jumps off the page to me. The defense was clearly built to play in front of their goaltending situation, but the forward core is very, very well rounded and would probably be the reason that they win the tournament. So I'm gonna throw up on the board, Liam. Back, I want to say months ago,
Yeah,
we made projections for power play lines for each team. So why not throw it up? I'm going to throw it up on the board, see what we had came up with originally. And as you could see, we were relatively spot on, except we went 4 for 5. So Cale Makar at the point, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, Braden Point. But Point will be swapped with Sam Reinhart. And your thoughts on that?
I think Point is the best bumper player in the NHL. I don't understand how he's not on it. And I don't think Reinhardt plays bumper in Florida. So it's interesting to me because I feel like you want the best player in their spot. And the bumper is it's not an easy position to be good at. So having a guy like Point not on power play one while he's like the best bumper player in the NHL is an interesting decision. But nonetheless, you got McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby, and Makar. It doesn't really matter who else is there. They can, it's when those guys are on the ice, the other team is going to be, they're going to need a new pair of pants if they're getting completely peppered by shots from McDavid going over to McKinnon and it's tipped in front by Crosby.
Yeah, no doubt. I think whether it's Reinhart, the guy who scored like 50 plus goals last year, more if not
57, something
right.
like that.
So either whether it's him or whether it's Point, I don't think it's going to matter all that much. But just for fun, it was fun to see what that looked like. We'll move on, Liam, to the U.S. Probably on paper the best team in the tournament, I would say. And we've talked about this before, but they've obviously benefited from having superior goaltending to pretty much any other team in the tournament. But we'll start with the forward core. Jack Eichel between Kyle Connor and Matthew Tkachuk. Austin Matthews between Jake Gensel and Jack Hughes. JT Miller between Boldy and Brady Tkachuk. And then Vincent Trocheck between Brock Nelson and Dylan Larkin. Thoughts?
I like how they scratched Kreider. Say that. It's actually a very interesting combination, I find. I didn't think Gensel was going to get a top 6 role, and Brady Tkachuk is pretty low, but overall, again, it's a very deep team, very deep offensive core. But if I'm comparing this to Canada, I think Canada is way better, to be honest. Like, I know they've got the Jack Eichel, they've got the Matthews, they've got Tkachuk and Jack Hughes, but if I'm comparing it to McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, Braden Point, Sam Reinhart, Mitch Marner, I'm taking Canada.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare the top 6s, honestly, because one is more, I think, what's the word that I'm looking for? Not even, but
they're more spread out.
Right. Like I would say well-rounded is the word, like we mentioned the defense before. And I think that plays a huge factor into which one I would determine is better in terms of top 6. But I think I would take the US. Like I'm looking at this and it's hard for me to argue against the fact that you have Matthews, who's he's obviously gone through what he's gone through this year, but in a short tournament, he's probably one of the better players. Like granted, I think Canada has the top 2 or 3. Like it depends where you want to put Crosby and all this. But nonetheless, I think Matthews is probably right after that in terms of forwards, in terms of what he's capable of. And then Jack Eichel, like he's a top 10. Like he in my opinion, at his best, and I think he just flies under the radar a lot for some reason, because I think Vegas plays that collective team game, but he's won a cup, and I think that he can arguably be a top 10 player in the NHL at times. Like I think he's that good. He was drafted 2nd overall, and I think that he's proven that pretty much ever since that he's left Buffalo. But all of that to say is that I think that 1-2 down the middle, and then complemented by, I don't know. I mean, it's right in front of you. I don't need to read it out. It's just, to me, it's scary. It's scary from an offensive perspective.
One thing that I'm going to point out that could be interesting is the difference in the amount of cup winners on Team Canada's team versus the US. So you look at Team Canada's offensive core, so many of those guys have Stanley Cups and multiple Stanley Cups. Where you look at this roster, and I believe it's just Gensel, Tkachuk, and Eichel who have Stanley Cups. Gensel obviously came in as a rookie, I believe, and won, and then won again the year after, I believe. But then Eichel and Tkachuk have won each. So maybe that plays a difference. Maybe that plays a role in being best suited for the highest pressure games. We'll see how. I don't think the games are going to be like a playoff game. I don't think it's going to have the same physicalness or the same physicality or aggressiveness because I think all these guys know that they don't want to kill each other for the rest of the season, and they want to be in the playoffs. And I'm sure the playoffs are more important to them than this. But I don't know. Maybe that plays a role in just the overall pressure and being prepared for it.
Yeah, I wonder. I again, it's also obviously I've said this many times before today, but just the fact that it's a short tournament, I wonder how much of a how much importance we're going to place on that. Like I don't know, but definitely an interesting observation considering that the discrepancy is so significant. But we'll keep going down here. Defensive pairings, you've got Slavin on the left, Fox on the right, Werenski on the left, McAvoy on the right, Hannafin on the left, Brock Faber on the right. Interesting. I think. Well, this is also with Quinn Hughes injured, so
Yeah,
that
he's
obviously
out.
plays a huge role. Huge role. I'm not overly impressed by this decor, but it's not to say that it's probably as good, if not better, than Canada's. And the only reason that Canada would have the edge, in my opinion, is strictly because they have Cale Makar. But
Yeah, I mean, Slavin, obviously, we know his defensive game, maybe one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL. But losing Quinn Hughes is going to be big for them because he was their best defenseman, in my opinion.
by far,
Obviously, Werenski is having a great year, Norris caliber, but we're going to see who's going to take that step and be their number one D-man, whether that's McAvoy, Werenski, or Fox. But again, like I like Makar a lot more than any of these defensemen. And I don't know. I think Quinn Hughes may hurt them a lot, but I think they make up for that with their goaltending.
yeah, I think so too. And the thing is that there's no lack of offense on this team in general. So I don't know. Like Quinn Hughes is incredibly dynamic on the back end, and his numbers speak to that. We talked about this before, but I just obviously he's going to play a huge role. But I think it would also be easy to forget about him in the sense that when it's just these star-studded teams that have so many players, it's not that Quinn Hughes wouldn't have an impact. It's just more that I think it's just easy to get lost in how many good players there are that he's just the fact that he's not present doesn't.
There's always there's someone available to step up. It's not like it's the Canucks and they're
like Vincent Darnay, for example, right? Like,
yeah.
Like
there you go.
That's kind of my 2 cents, but nonetheless, yeah, huge loss. I think that definitely plays a factor into maybe not where they finish in the tournament, but definitely affects, for example, their power play, which we'll get into right now, because we can assume that originally, well, right now, and can you confirm this with me that this is the actual power play line or no?
I can't confirm that, to be honest, but
you cannot. Okay.
I can tell you in 1 second if you want to go.
Yeah. But so I'll go over this while you check that out. But as of right now, they have Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, and Matthew Tkachuk, with Matthews at the point and Werenski quarterbacking this power play. Now, what I was going to mention before is we can all pretty confidently assume that if Quinn Hughes were healthy, he would obviously take Quinn Hughes' spot. Quinn Hughes would take Zach Werenski's spot, excuse me. But nonetheless, if this is the real power play, scary. Honestly, scary. I mean, obviously, it's hard to compare it to Canada's power play. I think they're both ridiculously dynamic and good. I think Canada has the edge because they have a few players that are, in my opinion, just better. But I think that's pretty much a consensus opinion. But
just jumping in, I believe that this is just a projection, but it appears Zach Werenski. It appears Werenski is the one in the quarterback position, though.
Interesting. What do you think about that over Adam Fox?
I think the way Werenski is playing right now, he deserves it. But at the same time, look at his power play. You're 4 lefties and 1 righty. So maybe having a guy like Fox is ideal just in terms of the handedness of the players. But I think I'd take Werenski right now over Fox.
Interesting. I don't know if I could, though. Like I think Werenski's unbelievable, and there's like there's very little flaws in his game. But I think strictly from an offensive perspective, I don't know. Personally, I find it hard to argue against Fox being better offensively than Werenski. Like Werenski's having, I wouldn't call it an anomaly of a season. Most players have I wouldn't say a late breakout, but he's clearly finding his game at a very opportune time with Columbus in his career. But I think Fox consistently throughout his career has been better offensively, and he might be. Anyway, that's my
No,
opinion.
that's fair.
And
I
truthfully,
think,
does it really change much at the end of the day? I don't think so.
yeah, no, maybe not. But you might be right because they have so many good shooters and scorers. You don't need Werenski's goal scoring ability, and maybe you need Fox's passing ability.
Right.
So that could be an argument.
But I think that's something that we can both agree on, that if Quinn Hughes were in the lineup, I think that's a guy that is undoubtedly the better suited player to be quarterbacking that power play.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
we'll leave it at that for them. And then goalie wise, Hellebuck and Ottinger. I mean, to me,
It's going to be Hellebuck, no question.
Like if it's not Hellebuck, there's something clearly wrong, because I mean, look at the season that he's having. If you guys obviously tuned in last episode, I had mentioned that he would be my MVP pick, my Hart Trophy pick. And I still stand by it, except McKinnon is really, I mean, obviously it's hard to argue against McKinnon, but can we backtrack for a second on something else? Like, I think it's really hard right now for me to choose someone other than McKinnon, even though I like Hellebuck. But look what he's doing with Marty Necas. Like,
it's insane. And look what Rantanen's doing without McKinnon.
And look what he's doing with a coach that's giving him 17 minutes a game. Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stand by that. I don't think that the Carolina system is suited for players to thrive in an off. Like, I don't think that they'll ever have an 100-point scorer in that system, and that's totally
Probably
fine
not.
because look at how good they are and dominant they are in the regular season, and maybe for a round or two of the playoffs. But like, Necas can easily be a 90+ point player with McKinnon.
Yeah,
Easily, I think
it's crazy how much of an effect McKinnon has on the players around him. Necas is just unstoppable, and McKinnon is the reason why. And you can't even sugarcoat it because, I mean, yes, the fact is Necas is getting more minutes, but can we argue now that McKinnon made Rantanen into a 50-goal scorer? If he's continuing on this pace, he's not even an 80-point player.
Yeah, I wonder. I think that's a really interesting conversation, and obviously it's worth diving a little bit more into. Like, I think Rantanen is still...
He's still great.
I don't know, because the truth is that, do you think McKinnon knows how good he is? Like, that's like the most humble guy ever. Excuse me. And every time someone talks to McKinnon, it almost seems like he's just,
So it's always about the team.
People are around him, and it's like, this guy is... We always say it. It's closer to McDavid than anyone else is. Is closer to McDavid. Is closer to McDavid than anyone else in the league is close to him.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good way to put it.
It's nuts. It's just absolutely nuts. And we'll leave it at that with him. But like, and the Rantanen and Necas situation. But I do think that if they can exploit Necas's ability to play alongside McKinnon better than Rantanen's ability to play alongside McKinnon, you win the trade.
Yeah.
You win the trade purely based off the fact that Necas, no matter what, even though if he outperforms Rantanen's ability, it will be such a small sample size in terms of like a season and a half that he'll get less money and they'll be able to add somewhere else. And then maybe Necas's contract with Colorado just looks like a pure steal at one point.
Yeah. I don't think Rantanen's going to get that 14 million anymore. After
he's gonna get that 14 million, but I do still think that, and again, it's obvious, like, there's teams that are just gonna throw money at him because they need to fill the salary cap, and they're not gonna pass up on the chance to spend 13. Like we mentioned this last offseason with Reinhart before he went back to Florida, but we had mentioned, like, why wouldn't Chicago or why wouldn't San Jose give him $3 million more than Florida?
Yeah.
Like, there was literally no reason not to do that. And our theory about Bedard and being surrounded by players, like if he had a Reinhart next to him.
Honestly, it's just sad in Chicago because they should just throw 16 million at Rantanen and see what happens, because that's a disaster in itself.
It is a disaster. And honestly, like at one point, obviously NHL player, like the NHL as a league is obviously run by the league and run by the teams and run by the GMs, as opposed to the players, where we see that more in the NBA. But at one point, it wouldn't like you look at his situation, and obviously he's what 19 or 20 years old now. It would be very hard for me to disagree with him asking for a trade at some point,
Yeah.
or instead of wanting to resign. Like trade me. I know I'm an RFA, but trade my rights because I'm not signing like I'm speaking from his position. Like what would entice him to sign an 8-year deal in Chicago? Like to me, it would be nothing based on the way that they've done their business so far.
Yeah, and it's a new coach every year. It seems like there's just no direction. It's not a great prospect pool, to be honest. So this is his second year, right?
Second year in the NHL, yeah.
And it's not looking too bright. Like he obviously came in to this organization knowing it's going to be a long road ahead to the playoffs, but when there's no plan, it just seems like they're just never going to be good, kind of like the Sabres.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just so crazy to me that you look at his numbers, like just for fun, through, I guess, he played 68 games in 2023-24 because he got injured for a bit, but 55 games so far this season. In his career, he has 110 points in 123 games. So think about that. He's almost point per game, and like I guess it's a small sample size, but he's pretty close to point per game in his career, in his young career as a 19-year-old. And look at his line mates. Just ridiculous. Like
Ryan Donato.
He hasn't had anything consistent. Yeah, Ryan Donato. For those listening, if it weren't for Ryan Donato this week in fantasy, I wouldn't have beat Liam. So
it was abuse. Ryan Donato abused me this
fantasy
week.
Points or something crazy like that. Pretty nuts.
But that just speaks to how Bedard affects the players around him too. And Ryan Donato's putting up 4-point games.
I mean, exactly.
Who knows?
But again, you know what the problem with that, Liam, is like, who knows if Ryan Donato will be on the team come deadline, let alone So,
yep.
I mean, anyway, we'll move on. Interesting how these Four Nations conversations bring us to that. But but I'm not going to move on just yet because we had said we'll look at the power plays. And this one's funny, Liam. This one's funny because one of the guys that we had on the power play didn't even make the team. So
I don't even remember this.
I know I think we had a conversation about it, but I'll put it up. Adam Fox at the point. Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, Matthew Tkachuk, and the guy that didn't make the team, Jason Robertson. So, a couple things here. One, Fox on the power play, which right now we talked about is probably Werenski. But granted, we also made a mistake because I think at the time we had realistically we had to operate under the assumption that Quinn Hughes was healthy, and if Quinn Hughes was healthy, we should have put him on this list. So, I don't know what our reasoning behind putting Fox over Hughes was. Maybe it was the handedness stuff. But Robo in the bumper, I think we had put him there because I think he's pretty. I mean, look, he's not having a great season, but I think that he's definitely a gadget guy that could be really good in a bumper spot on a dynamic power play like the one that the US has. But
he's been better recently, so I really think he could have made this team.
Right. I just think it's interesting because who knows how it's like. If you look at the Canada team, we had put Point, but they put Reinhart. But Reinhart's a great bumper player, and so is Point. So it's easy to make that like that's a fine decision to make. I'm just really curious to see what they actually do once the line is set, because do they maybe because when we talked about the power play lines just before, they had it set with Hughes, Eichel, Matthews, Tkachuk, and Werenski. But realistically, all those guys need the puck on their stick, pretty much, right? So you're gonna have to put a guy. You're gonna have to take that. Like, do they take a guy off? Do they leave all those four guys on, or do they look more for a specialized guy that can be great in a bumper role, or like more maybe go towards like a Kyle Connor, who's like more of a one-timer guy? I don't know.
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't even know any of bumper player on that team. Like, I'm just trying to maybe
like JT Miller. I don't know.
Maybe Miller. But even then, JT likes to play around the edge, like maybe Gensel.
Yeah, I don't know. I think obviously it'll be like interesting to see, but we did have Robertson. He was left off the team along with Caulfield, along with Tage Thompson, which we've talked about in the past. But we'll see if that if choosing Brock Nelson over a few of these guys proves to be the right decision or not, and whether, if I'm not mistaken, it's Bill Guerin, the GM of the US, and Mike Sullivan, head coach, along with John Tortorella. Which, did you know that he was an assistant coach of this
I
team?
actually had no idea.
I just saw that this morning, that he was chatting with a few guys on the ice, and I wonder what plays into that decision, because I saw David Quinn, now assistant coach in Pittsburgh, but former head coach of San Jose, is on that staff too. And I'm obviously that probably speaks to the fact that Sullivan is the head coach of the team. But I wonder what the idea of bringing in Tortorella is. Nothing against him. I think we can both agree that his style might be a little bit outdated and especially for a team like this that is purely offensive. Like purely offensive.
It's kind of a weak coaching staff in general. I mean, I feel like Sullivan had his days. He's Quinn, and then Tortorella again. It's kind of different. It's bringing in like an opposing view. So I don't know if Sullivan's setting his strategy and then Torts is just going along with it, or I don't know the story. I don't know all the American coaches either. Like, is Jared Bednar, for example? I think he's Canadian, but I don't. It's just an interesting staff to me.
I was just looking at it for fun. Like, well, I guess I won't be able to check it out, the nationalities of each coach. But if I had to guess, like Paul Maurice, John Cooper, Bruce Cassidy, Bednar, all Canadian. Leaves you with, I guess, not like Brenda Moore Canadian too, right? So I don't know what the deal is. I guess Sullivan has a great track record in terms of, I mean, more recently hasn't been as great, but anyway, we'll leave it at that. Definitely an interesting coaching staff. But I thought that the Tortorella thing was interesting.